Good morning. Hello. Welcome back to part two. My name is Patience. This is a continuation of yesterday's episode number 20 for our Spirit News podcast. Spirit and Identity. It was a doozy. If you missed it, it's recorded for you. You can definitely go find it from yesterday's live. We chose to do these episodes live so we could have Spirit's real time interaction and about the conversations that we're bringing up when it comes to identity. The question that brought this episode upon us was me asking Spirit, how does Spirit view humans and our identities and the way we attach to them, and because of my own experiences with having a very fluid identity, having an identity that has never been fixed, and recognizing that and observing that ever since I was a child, and just having this different point of view through my spiritual abilities that I've always had as a child. I've had a different perspective, and I've noticed that a lot of people in my life have had a very fixed identity, and that when they are around other people, they are oftentimes shape-shifting in front of other people, but when it comes to them being alone, I notice that they can act different or be in a different energy than the way they are around people. Good morning, Robin. Good morning. I had to do a continuation because I was so nervous about not. There's so much information that I was getting that I couldn't touch on all of it. And one of the most important things I wanted to touch on was, and you brought it up in the chat, and I saw it, and that was my chance to like mention it, but there was just so much. But it was about sexual orientation and gender identification. We didn't get to touch on that, so I was, I have all of these points that I wanted to make, but I've never made a 2.5 hour live in my life. So I was like, oh my god, that was wild. Lucas, hello. Who let the cats out? That's funny. Anyone who says anything I don't like, I block them because I hate feeling. Oh, well, I'm sorry that you hate feeling. I'm sorry about that. Free speech is the worst. Good morning. You really lifted my spirits. Oh, thank you, Snake Man. Well, thank you for being here. Thank you, everyone, for being here. I'm so grateful. My name is Patience. This is a part two of Spirit and Identity from yesterday. Some of the things that we hit on was electromagnetism, how we're electromagnetic. We touched on, you can definitely go back to get it's a 2.5 hour live, so God bless you if you stay for the whole thing. We really appreciate you. You can definitely do the summarization, the AI summarization, if you'd like to catch up. But we're going to touch on some other modern day archetypes, and what we're doing is we're observing the similarities between the current modern stories of today, whether they're our politics, our celebrities, our entertainment, just our overall social, the way we are developing and attaching ourselves to identity, and the way it mirrors in the ancient past, because I've noticed that nothing's new in the universe. There's nothing new. Everything is just like a mirroring or mimicking, just in different bodies, just in different eras. And so a lot of the stories that unfold, like one we used was David Burke, the singer David Burke. We used him as an example to show how the path he chose to identify with actually fixed him in the outcome that happened, where he thought that he had to save the identity that he built rather than letting go of it and creating a new, more authentic identity. And that definitely mirrors it mirrors a specific story, a mythic story. So what we're realizing is that archetypes are what spirit has said to us, and I definitely can't prove it, but I resonate with it, and we're just giving you the information. We're definitely not experts. I'm not a psychologist. I'm not a doctor. I'm not a professional journalist. I'm not a professional writer. I'm just a normal human that decided to listen to her spirit guidance and accept that she's psychic and that she has been her whole life, and that everybody's psychic, and that as long as I'm a good person and I have true pure intentions and I want to help people, that has lifted me to a path of being able to receive spiritual guidance and putting that guidance into real-time action, using myself as an experiment of spiritual guidance, and then putting all the data for you to look at so you can make your own informed decision about how the universe truly works. Ultimately, we want you to be happy. We want you to choose happiness. We want you to find the key to happiness. And I believe I found it by living electromagnetically. So we talked about duality and electromagnetism, and living your life electromagnetically, just like a lot of philosophers of the past alluded to. I believe that philosophers, although they weren't labeled as psychics, I believe because of their moral and value and their morality and their choice to live through divine values and morality, put them in a place of open receptivity to get this knowledge and to document it. And it's kind of the same things that we're getting from spirit. And so I believe it was inspirited. I'm not happy where I'm at. I'm trying to change it though. Well, that's the key. The real Skippy John Jones, that's the key. As long as you're willing to identify and accept that you're not happy where you're at and that you want to change it, that's the first step. Now you have to ask how you can do that. Okay, so I'm very happy for you. We talked about duality and electromagnetism. We talked about the golden mean and electromagnetism, and what I'm trying to look for it, I'm sorry, and what Aristotle said about the Neo-Machian ethics, where if you want to achieve a flourishing life, then you have to live electromagnetically by not, by living in the golden mean, which is a balanced state of being, where you recognize it's duality, where there's two poles, and they're the extremes of positivity and negativity, and it's up to you to just kind of bounce yourself between the two to kind of live in the middle. And so Aristotle said, a virtue, meaning excellence, is a habit of character that enables you to make the right choices. And so he said, I want to say, being virtuous means knowing how to feel or act at the right time, toward the right people, for the right motive, and in the right way. So it basically goes, to your intention. You can make a mistake and be an ignorant student and not have a malintention, but accidentally hurt somebody. So then what would you do in that moment to make it right? You know that you wouldn't want to be put in that position. Sometimes doing the right thing is the hardest thing to do. And so it's being virtuous means knowing how to feel or act at the right time, toward the right people, for the right motive, in the right way. And using the golden mean or duality or electromagnetism as a way to understand in those moments how to do that. Use the golden mean. You're not in deficiency and you're not in excess. The virtue is in the middle. And so he says to do that through habituation. You don't become good at playing the piano just by reading a book about music theory. You have to practice. And so being a good person, if you don't feel you are a good person, isn't something that you can never be again, or something that you lost, or something that is missing. It's something that you gain back through your everyday small intention to do so. Okay, until it becomes a habituation and you continually choose to do the right thing based upon your past lessons of how you didn't do the right thing, and then you recognize the consequences of that. Okay, I didn't see what Robin said. Let me see. I didn't see. This chat should be kept respectful. Please hit the like button. Oh, thank you so much. Thank you, Robin. I love you. Every female streamer thinks they're all S symbols. I don't know what that. She is fire and fairness. Oh, thank you. Thank you so much. I appreciate that. Well, thank you all for being here. So I just want to touch on some of the themes that we went over in the last in the part 1, because identity is a big topic, and what we're finding. Hey, the lightning is yellow. She's not trans, and watch your mouth here. This is a spiritual channel. I clicked it. Oh, thank you so much. I guess it's just showing them where they're at, showing us where they're at, Robin. Okay, so we left off on those themes, and I just wanted to touch on them again, just as a reminder. And then I did want to read a message that Spirit gave me that I said yesterday, but I think it's important to say it again. So, sorry. So Spirit and identity, some of the questions some of the things we're gonna go over today is identity influenced by trauma, expectation, identity influenced by surrender and acceptance. And then one of the things Spirit said was the blueprint. Spirit said that basically, in a nutshell, and I gave Spirit's message first in the last episode. It's part 1, and I usually give the Spirit message last, but Spirit's like, do it first this time, and I'm doing it a little bit differently this time. It's not as structured, because I wanted to have Spirit be part of the conversation. So I'm going to do that again today. But Spirit says you should be identifying as a soul first. You should be identifying as a soul first. You're not just some meat sack that just arrived randomly and exploded onto the scene. You're an infinite photonic, limitless being of psychokinetic, electromagnetic energy. You're non-physical, and you are part of a source. And when you come into a human incarnation, we go through cycles of remembering and cycles of forgetting. And we're going into a cycle of remembering, into a golden age. And so it's really important for you to identify yourself first and foremost as a soul. And the reason why that's important is because, and it's what we're doing and we're living by example, is that if you recognize that you're a spiritual entity having a human experience, it helps you to ground yourself in what you are. If you are disconnected from what you are and you continually make decisions and choices that continue to pull you away from your natural state, which is pure positive love and pure positive energy, and you do actions and things that are opposite of that natural state you are, you will continue to pull yourself farther and farther away from happiness, essentially. Your soul is the essence of happiness. And so if you find yourself identifying in a particular way, but you're still experiencing unhappiness, you may want to consider that it is the disconnection from your soul and the malnourishment of your soul and the continuation of you investing in an identity that is so far from your soul's true essence that it's perpetuating unhappiness for you. And so our ultimate goal is for everyone in it. If we were to dream big and have our ultimate goal be um, manifested, it would be for everyone to know that they're never alone, that they always have guidance. Oh, I'm gonna cry. I'm gonna cry. I think I cried like 3 times in the last episode. That you always have guidance, you're never alone, you're never abandoned, that your soul is always connected to divine energy, and that is the whole reason why you even exist. That happiness is directly tied to your soul, and that happiness is a direct reflection of your divinity. Okay? And so that is what we want to start with, because in this world and in these certain cycles, we have times where we identify with what we think we want and what we think we need, and we are disconnected from spiritual guidance that could help us take the path of destiny rather than the path of fate. And so this is what Spirit says when it comes to that. Okay, so Spirit says that you incarnate with a blueprint. And what we discussed yesterday was that archetypes are programs. And so every era that we incarnate into, the archetype the archetypes of the previous cycle get imprinted on the next cycle or round of existence. And this has happened millions of times. This isn't anything new. That's why Spirit says there's nothing new in the universe. It's a fractal universe. It's electromagnetic, so it's a toroidal field that's constantly recycling itself, just in different faces, bodies, times, and eras. Okay? And so if we were to take this as a fact, if we were, and which is what I'm doing in my life, and being the example of it, when I feel ungrounded or I'm confronted with a tough situation, remembering my blueprint, remembering my true state helps bring me back out of my mind back into my heart, which is where your soul lies. Your heart is the seat of the soul, okay? And so Spirit says the blueprint is like a caterpillar transforming into a butterfly, except unlike humans, the caterpillar doesn't question the process. It knows what it must do and has surrendered to the blueprint of its design. It understands what it must do because it's programmed into its DNA and doesn't have outside influence or interference interrupting the program of its design. It knows what it is, what its role is, and where it's going and what it's going to become. And so Spirit gave me this nugget, and what really stands out to me is that unlike caterpillars that don't have any outside interruptions or deviations from their blueprint, humans are opposite. They have many external things that need to pop up in order to push them towards their destiny or towards their path, or not towards their destiny and towards fate. And so what Spirit wants us to know is that it's not right or wrong. It's not about oh, I messed up and I'm horrible and I suck and I'm never gonna, and this is never, I'm never gonna be who I want, I'm never gonna be successful. It's like coming here is quite literally about limitations. And the whole point of coming here is because you're infinite and you want to experience limitations. If you have to imagine that if you were an infinite being of limitless potential and you could have anything you want and you always felt loved and you always felt connected, over time you're going to want something that challenges you. And so, a lot the question that we get a lot is, why do children have to die? Why do people have to get cancer? Why do, spouses have to pass away? And you quite literally, as a soul, have to forget the reason why you came, and the reason you came is actually to experience those things. And because outside of this universe, when you go back home, there's no such thing as death, there's no such thing as limitations, and there's no other emotions other than love. Earth is the place to experience love fractured into a million pieces. And so, what that looks like is emotions, energy, emotion. Why do we always feel the need to know why? I love that, Steve. I ask myself that question every day, and it literally propels me forward into researching, into asking the questions. And the dream is beautiful. Absolutely, absolutely. Hope is what people are conditioned to believe. Play it safe. Take a risk. If you fall again, because success is there. And success is also, as we move forward into heart consciousness, is going to be measured differently. There's not going to be any more celebrities. There's not going to be any more people that we put on a pedestal that we idolize. We have to be our own best friend. Spirit gave me the best advice, and because I was always like, why can't I keep a friend? Why do friends always turn on me? Why do people do this? Why do people do that? And Spirit says, well, every one of us has to have people in our lives that shift our perspective, and that perspective gets shifted through challenges. If nothing challenged you, you wouldn't have anything to push you forward. If you didn't question why certain things happen, then it wouldn't propel us to create or come up with ideas or creative ways to get out of 22, 24, 22, 22, 22 in the chat. And so we quite literally come here to be challenged. And so what we view as the end or death, or it is sad. It is. And I'm not saying that we should be cold-hearted people that you know recognize death as an illusion, which it is, but it's about shifting our perspective a little and understanding that death isn't the end, and you can still conversate. Anybody can. Everybody's psychic. Everybody has a soul, so everybody is psychic. Psychic is just a label that we've placed upon the natural consequence of accepting ourselves as a soul. Your soul is the thing that's interconnected to the all. And once you identify as a soul first, as a spiritual being having a human experience, it helps you to anchor in to the truth of your true presence, your true essence. And then it helps you to shift your perspective when it comes to obstacles and things that you might experience here on the earth realm. Okay, so that's kind of like what we talked about yesterday, but there's a lot of things I didn't get to touch on, so I'm just going to hop right in, okay? So I hope that you're caught up. If not, you'll have to, it's 2.5 hours, so you're going to have to break it up. Or if you're lucky enough like me to be able to listen through while you're working, then good for you. You might want to do that. Okay, so we didn't get to talk about identity to occupation, identity to sexual orientation, identity through romantic relationships. So I'm going to try not to make this a 2.5 hour live, but Spirit don't know no time. Spirit is no time. Oh, thank you so much. So I just want to thank everyone for being here. Thank you so much. I really appreciate you guys showing up. I'm just a mere human earthling that's committed to living the spiritual life by living it, breathing it, eating it, shitting it, okay? Oh, yes, it's my lighting. Let me just, okay, I could be blue. If you want me to be a blue being, I could be, see, this is too bright for me. It's just like comfy, it's just comfy. So this, we're not doing a reading today. It's not about a reading. This is about what all the readings we've done and all of the meditations and all of the messages and all of the research that we've done to help you understand yourself. Okay, so we did talk about, I'm just going to mention this real quick before I hop into identity and occupation. But we did, Spirit brought to us the Breeze app. The Breeze app is for neurodivergent, which is a new level of consciousness, or a new, it's a type of consciousness. It's a different way of learning, okay? And that's where we're going. All of the children are going to be neurodivergent, and that's just a label. The future people are going to be more neurodivergent, and so it requires you to shift your understanding of this new way of thinking. And so a great tool for that is the Breeze app. It's Breeze, Breeze, and what it does is it helps you to organize your thoughts a little more, because I know as a neurodivergent person, especially someone whose spiritual abilities are being activated, which everyone's will be, you're going to want to start to get to know yourself more. So it has a lot of personality tests, and it has a lot of emotional tests, and focus skills, temperament type, personality type. The reason why this is important in this time is because the collective unconscious is going through an identity shift, and through an energy shift, and all of our consciousnesses are linked together, and the veil is very thin, and we're getting a lot of solar blasts, and it can make you feel emotions that aren't your own more strongly. And so you want to be able to separate your own emotions from others, because you can't just lock yourself up in a room and not experience the world. You have to be like Yeshua and reflect yourself off of people and go out into the world and discern the spirit within people, so you know where people are at. And the only way to do that is to know where you're at all times, and to understand yourself so much that if someone tries to project themselves onto you, you can identify, well, that's you, not me. That's how you feel. That's not how I feel. Okay? So you don't absorb it and then become that, and then you're so confused because you're like, oh, I didn't feel that yesterday, but now it's like, oh, this is. So it's energy. Energy is fluid. It can bounce from person to person. And so you have to be able to separate it. So we highly recommend this app. It has a lot low mood check, happiness level, focus skills, communication skills, mood swing screening, anger scale, loneliness scale, imposter syndrome, inner child, and on it goes. But what I also like about it is that it has the activities, and it has a journaling prompt, which I think is really cool. You can track your mood. You can foster gratitude, because we always talk about gratitude being the closest way to get to God is through gratitude, because it's the closest emotion that you can do right away to get yourself closer to the frequency of divinity. And if you're lacking gratitude, it's literally the closest way. If you have a hard time finding things you're grateful for, fostering gratitude is an awesome tool to use. Okay, so I just wanted to bring that up again. But yeah, you can do the journal. You can ease anxiety, reflect on what's worrying you. They have affirmations, which we really love. You are a person with infinite potential. Affirmation. I'm just going to share that so everybody knows that you're limitless, because you need to identify as your soul first and foremost, and then you can start building or manifesting what you think you want to be. Okay, so what we're going to talk about today, what we didn't get to touch on yesterday, one of the things I want to bring up is identity and relationships, because there's a lot of people who get obsessed with their relationship. Their identity becomes their relationship, and then they put so much focus energy and effort into a person that they leave themselves behind, and they don't understand, why they're unhappy when they think they're doing everything to make sure that this person stays in their life, and that this person loves them, and then or they'll get upset that this they put all their eggs in this person's basket to make them feel loved, but the person doesn't show up in the way they need them to feel loved, when really you should feel loved first by from yourself. And it comes back to be your own best friend. Like Spirit's like, you got to be your own best friend, and then you'll attract people that match the way you're showing up for yourself. And so I'm like, I'm an awesome best friend. I would be the best friend. I care so much about you. I care what you do. I care about your hobbies and your endeavors, and I want to be your number one fan. I'm my number one fan. If people don't want to be my friend, they're missing out, because I am a really good friend. Okay, so I just wanted to say that before we start. So one of the archetypes, so we've been talking about archetypes and programs. So when it comes to romance, or when it comes to relationships, one of the things Spirit brought to us was Temptation Island. And I know you're like, why would Spirit bring that to you? But I think it's just more of the message behind it. Okay, so Temptation and Island and Identity. On its surface, Temptation Island is a highly engineered reality TV show designed to test romantic fidelity by separating couples and surrounding them with attractive singles. However, when viewed through a psychological and sociological lens, the show serves as a fascinating and often brutal crucible for individual and relational identity, because they put themselves in a situation where they have to be separated, where these couples, a lot of them, when we watch the show, we find that they are with each other every single day, like they don't separate from each other, and then you put them in this extreme environment and you rip them away from each other, and they start to realize that they actually don't have any autonomy. They don't have any sense of self outside of their relationship, and they actually start getting anxiety about not having that person to reinforce the validation they're receiving from them. And so the show strips away the external markers of a person's everyday life and forces a deep, often chaotic confrontation with the self. The intersection of Temptation Island and identity manifests in several distinct ways. Spirit, how do you feel about the show to start us off? Describe a time you were terrified. Yeah. Because when you put yourself, I think they go in, who do you act nice around but you secretly dislike? Yeah, it makes you realize that, have you ever skinny dipped? It's like you spend so much time around a person and you put so much energy and effort into the person instead of yourself, and that person ends up getting a big job or starts working out, and they end up becoming the energy that you put into them, and then oftentimes they'll leave you, or they'll walk away from you because now they're better than you are, and they took everything from you. So there's a lot of ways that this can show up, and Temptation Island is just a severe extreme example of when you lose that person you put so much energy into. Okay. When people are in the disruption of the coupled identity, when people are in a long-term relationship, their individual identity often fuses with a shared identity, becoming us instead of me. And Temptation Island violently disrupts this. The identity vacuum, by stripping away the partner, the shared routine, and regular communication, contestants are abruptly forced back into a state of total independence, which they might not be ready for, because it's In the real world, let's say that that person left you. You know, you put all this time and effort into a person and you build them up because you think that's what love is, and you don't build yourself up, and then they cheat on you, or they leave you, or they, you know, they blame you, or and they want something that matches their energy because they took all your energy. You know, you're left in a place of devastation, and it can cause a lot of hurt and betrayal, and it can cause you to act in a broken heart, you know, within a broken heart. Um, so, the narrative crisis. Many contestants enter the show with a fixed narrative. This is not your dumping ground. Oh, thank you. Many contestants enter the show with a fixed narrative of who they are in the relationship. I am the stable caretaker. I am the reformed cheater. Placed in isolation, they are forced to confront whether those identities are authentic or merely defenses built to survive their specific relationship dynamics. And that's another thing, you know, we have in that show, what I notice a lot of times the couples go on who have been cheated on by the person, and so they want to test the person instead of just radically practicing radical forgiveness for the person and starting over from a new place. And that's another thing we talked about yesterday, you know, radical altruism or radical forgiveness. Can you forgive somebody who did you wrong truly and authentically and start over, both of you, in a new energy? Because oftentimes, no. When someone cheats on you, you often, you know, oftentimes can't get past, you know, that they did that, and you think about it and you ruminate on it, and even if that person chooses, you know, made a mistake, and they see, you know, that's often a theme that comes up a lot. Okay. Temptation Island functions as the ultimate non-place. The contestants are dropped into a highly artificial luxury ecosystem with rules designed by television producers and not real life. Yeah, that's another thing. You know, they're surrounded by very romantic scenes where they're like by a waterfall and they're having a romantic dinner, or these very like elevated dates that they would normally not go on in a real world environment. So it's making it, you know, ultra romanticized and pulling you out of your element more. And you know, we bring up Temptation Island. Obviously, it's, you know, it's all, you know, artificial. But when it comes to the real world, it kind of is mirroring the real world, just not at an extreme level. And so that's why it's coming up, because they lack the grounding metrics of their real lives, their jobs, families, and daily habits. Their identities become highly malleable. In this vacuum, contestants often adopt entirely new personas or regress to younger, more reckless versions of themselves. You know, it's almost like an extreme psychological push into what needs to heal. You know, it's like a recognizing faster, identifying faster the things that hold them back from having fulfilling relationships. Okay. The bonfire as an identity mirror. The bonfire segments, where hosts show contestants highly edited, out of context clips of their partners interacting with singles, act as a psychological funhouse mirror. Perceived identity versus reality. When a contestant sees their partner acting out, it shatters their perception of their relationship's history and their partner's identity. Yeah, even though it's just a snippet. And that happens with our thoughts in real life. You can be in a relationship with someone and you're putting all your eggs in their basket, and if they make one little mistake or they do something that you perceive as not being, you know, faithful or loving or kind or whatever, it can shatter your whole, you know, reason why you even are with them. You know, it puts you in your thoughts. And so this is just an extreme version of that, where it's like a forced, you know, it's a forcing of that. The ego threat. Witnessing a partner drift away triggers a severe identity crisis. The wounded partner is forced to ask, if they don't want me, who am I? This existential panic frequently drives contestants to fast track emotional or physical intimacy with the singles in their own villa. So, going outside of their relationship, looking for emotional stability in someone else, and that's the rebound. And so you break up with somebody because they didn't fit, what they're not loving you enough, or they're not giving you enough love. You don't feel loved enough. And so you go outside of the relationship because you are perceiving, people aren't perfect. You have to teach people how you want to be loved, and that requires a lot of boundary setting, and that requires a lot of um, thoughtful reflection on your own actions as well. And so, it's Temptation Island is just a mirror of what it looks like in real time, but like in a really fast, really fast, almost like possibly even dangerous level of psychological evaluation, because it could even trigger a psychosis. So, the existential panic frequently drives contestants to fast track emotional, physical intimacy. So, going outside the relationship to find emotional validation. Okay? I noticed a bunch of gamers on here, they're not even interested in real life. Go to your channels and look. Oh, oh my gosh, thank you, Robin. I think gaming and identity, yeah, the internet and identity is another thing I didn't even think about. So you just brought that up. Thank you. Well, if we have time, we'll have to look into that. And so, performative identity and the Hawthorne effect. Contestants are entirely aware that they are being watched by millions of people. A psychological pressure known as the Hawthorne effect, where individuals modify their behavior because they know they're being observed. On Temptation Island, this creates a dual layer of performative identity. Contestants alternate between performing the role of the faithful, suffering partner for the cameras and leaning into the free-spirited single persona. The tragedy of the show often stems from the confusion between these performances and real feelings, leaving contestants genuinely unsure of their own true desires by the final bonfire. And so, the Hawthorne effect is something that Spirit is speaking of. Spirit. If you identify as your spirit first, then you know that there's always, I don't want to say someone watching, but there's ultimately always, you're never alone. And you always have your soul, your higher self, which is the pure personification of your true identity, which is a spiritual being having a human experience. And so it's another layer of our existence here. By identifying as your soul, you ultimately are accepting that there is a higher divine presence that isn't judging you per se, but is, and I don't want to say keeping track, but it is recording the thoughts, actions, and mechanisms of your current incarnation. And in my opinion, knowing that, it's not that I modify my behavior because I know that there's a higher intelligence. It's a reminder to me to remember that ultimately, if I act in this particular way, it is not matching a true magnetic force that exists. So it's not so much that I would be modifying my behavior to be perceived as a divine perfect being, but it's a reminder as to say, okay, well, I want to get angry right now, but my anger is just a reflection. It just helps you remember to get grounded in what you truly are. Like, I'm about to act in anger right now. I'm about to say something I don't mean. Let me ground into my true being. And so I don't say things I don't mean. It's like an anchoring point. So the Hawthorne effect for Temptation Island is obviously because we're watching them, and they might modify their behavior because they don't want to look or be perceived as bad people based on their emotional reactivity. But if you take that to a higher level, it's God. It's God. Not it's not that I want to disappoint God, because God's never disappointed, but it helps me remember that I'm not human. If I act this way now in this moment, what are the consequences? If I say this mean thing, in anger to my husband because I'm being immature, what are the implications of that? Can I take responsibility for that? So it's just an understanding that human behavior is not the same behavior as God. Okay? Requires consciousness of your intentions and awareness of the possible outcomes. Absolutely. Yes, thank you, Robin. You just reinforced yes. Okay? So then the ways it shows up in ancient myths is in toxic romances, and when we're it's many ways. So, we can't put all of it into a box, but this is just to help you and me too to understand energy, okay, to understand identity through energy and through spirit. We did we did a few episodes. We did an episode with Spirit, the way Spirit views men and women as sexes, and and the way Spirit views sex, from a higher perspective. So you can definitely watch those. But so right here, ancient cultures didn't view. Oh, I'm sorry. Hold on. Why did ancient cultures? And so one of the questions I had was about Greek mythology and toxic romance. Okay, ancient cultures didn't view myths as idealized happily ever after fairy tales, and this is why we think mythology is important, because every era has humans create mythological archetypes to express in that time psychological human behavior. And so going forward, it's just the same as asking your ancestors for advice. Like, the mere fact that we've been disconnected from our spiritual guidance from our ancestors is a disservice to our humanity. It was calculated and designed because if we were to gain knowledge from previous ancestors that did it before us, every generation would lead a better and better life, and it would grow and grow and grow into a golden age consciousness, which has been hijacked and has been redirected, and we're trying to veer it back on the path, or a new path. And Spirit says that this is a very special time because it hasn't been created in this specific way with this specific components. Okay, so it's actually never been done this way before. And one thing that we've meditated on and that we've seen is that we're gonna have to come to a point where we start creating new archetypes based upon our modern day era that we can document. And just like Aristotle, just like the philosophers of ancient times, just like Sumeria and Babylon and Roman and Greek, they all had these archetypes based upon myths that had human behaviors, because it was an easy way for them to understand themselves. And so we have new ones this today, and so I wanted to bring that up. But ancient cultures didn't view myths as idealized happily ever after fairy tales. Instead, mythology functioned as a mix of a psychological mirror, a legal code, a religious guide, and a high-stakes survival manual. That's what I'm saying. We should be taking these stories as our ancestors' accounts of dealing with these programs, which Spirit has said to us when you incarnate. Before you incarnate, you choose a program or an archetype that you want to live out, and based upon this blueprint, you can either, and it's totally random, and it doesn't have any set parameters other than, in theory, I would like it to have this trauma happen, and so I can overcome it in this very specific way. So one of the examples of that was Medusa, and so Medusa is an archetype, the story of Medusa, and the way that it can be perceived in modern day era is through Eileen Wuornos, which you can check out in the episode previous. We went into detail about it, but that's just an example of how an archetype or a program that was chosen before incarnation can play out in the physical realm. And the story of Medusa is the way it looks on the astral realm. On the astral realm, it's always more dramatic, and it's always more theatrical, and it's just more of 4D, like a storytelling, like a imagination realm, where it's the most dramatic version of itself, and then it comes into physicality, into modern day era, and it can look like Eileen Wuornos on a macro scale. But on a micro scale, it could be your own life, where you were persecuted for speaking the truth about your trauma. So to say, I just want to say that by pushing romantic relationships to their absolute catastrophic extremes, ancient storytellers were able to address deeply rooted human anxieties and social realities. Okay, here is why these toxic dynamics were so vital to ancient storytelling. The mirror of human nature, psychological catharsis. So, safe exploration of taboos. Yes, yes, yes. So, one of the, where is it? What the heck? Oh, here we go. Thank you. So ancient mythology is practically built on the foundation of messy, volatile, and profoundly toxic romances. Long before modern reality TV or dramatic romance novels, ancient cultures were using the gods and legendary heroes to explore the absolute worst impulses of human relationships. So, an example is Jason and Medea, Greek, the ultimate power couple meltdown. And this is just to give you examples of the mirroring of ancient storytelling to today's problems that we still face. Okay, if you want a blueprint for a relationship driven by trauma bonding, shared crimes, and a horrific breakup, look no further than Jason and Medea. This is to be able to help you identify what archetype you're living out, because if you can identify the archetype of the lesson you're supposed to learn, you can break yourself out of the cycle by recognizing that this is an archetype that was chosen by your soul. Okay, and you can, instead of identifying with the trauma that it's creating, you identify with the story that was already in existence that you chose as a soul, and you can identify where you can break the cycle or what you're supposed to learn from it. Okay. The dynamic: to help Jason win the Golden Fleece, Medea uses her dark magic to betray her own family, even murdering her brother to delay her father's pursuit. They flee together as a ride-or-die couple. Why it's toxic: after Medea sacrifices everything for Jason, he decides to politically climb by ditching her to marry the princes of Corinth. Medea's response isn't just grief, it's a total annihilation. She sends the new bride a cursed dress that burns her alive, kills the king, and in the ultimate act of psychological revenge to erase Jason's legacy, murders the children she had with Jason before escaping on a chariot pulled by dragons. Okay? Now this is the extreme, right? This is the extreme. I wonder, oh wait a second, let me see. Jason, Medea. Jason and Medea. I'm going to do an experiment real quick. So this is the story of the ultimate power couple. Let me see. What modern day true story mirrors the mythology and story of Jason and Medea? I just want to do this as an experiment. Oh, okay. Let me see. The partner in crime and radical escape, the story of Patty Hearst and Willie Wolfe. If you look at the first half of the myth, the wild rule-breaking adventure where a woman is radicalized, turns against her own family, uses her insider knowledge to help a charismatic leader, and flees the law, the 1970s saga of Patty Hearst and the Symbionese Liberation Army mirrors the dynamic. And I'm just doing this to show you that whatever identity that you're clinging to, whether it's romantic or whatever it is, has an archetype or a mythological story that can be connected to it. And the reason why that's important is because what it tells you is that it's a program. And if it's a program, that means that you can change the program. And the program is designed to help you understand yourself in a very specific way. But if you don't understand that it's a program, you attach yourself to that identity as being the ride or die bitch, or, you know, the if I can't have him, no one can have him, or, you know, you are attaching yourself to a false identity, and it's creating the turmoil which ensues. Okay. Um, if you look at the first half of the myth, the wild rule-breaking adventure where a woman is radicalized, turns against her own family. Oh yes, I'm sorry, I read that. Turning against her own blood. In the myth, Medea betrays her father, King Hades, and brutally kills her own brother to help Jason escape the Golden Fleece. In 1974, Patty Hearst, a wealthy newspaper heiress, was kidnapped by the left-wing terrorist group, the SLA, led by figures like Willie Wolfe and Donald DeFreeze. The radicalized helper, much like the myth where Medea is caught in a psychological trance or divine intervention to serve Jason, Hearst underwent intense brainwashing and trauma, Stockholm Syndrome. She changed her name to Tania, announced her wealthy family as capitalist pigs, and used her status and wealth to provide massive public leverage for the group. She actively participated in bank robberies and went on the run with them, abandoning her old life entirely to protect the group's mission. So it's just the terrifying reality of Jason and Medea's story is that it isn't an ancient horror story. It's a timeless psychological blueprint of what happens when profound self-sacrificing love is met with cold transactional betrayal. Okay. And what does Spirit have to say about it? Tell us about a time someone annoyed you to the point where you rolled your eyes to the back of your head. Okay, so you can't come to Earth without choosing a blueprint or an archetype. Like, the whole goal is to choose a lesson, to choose a catalyst of change. You have to have an archetype that has a very dramatic, traumatic, overarching, theme to push somebody to choose whether they want to attach themselves to the trauma or choose to break the cycle and not continue the pain and suffering that was put upon them. So you can't come here without it. That has to be done. If you just came as a blank slate, it would be very chaotic. It would be very you can do it. You can do that, but it would be very all over the place. It would lead to psychosis. It would lead to very quick death. It would lead to not an unveiling or a journey. It would be a very short time. Okay. So that leads us to. So we did relationships. So basically, what we're saying is that no matter who you're in love with or who you think you're in love with, if you aren't investing in yourself in that relationship, or even before you get a relationship, you're going to attract the energy of where you're at in that moment. So if you're somebody that has put all your eggs into the basket of your lover, then you're going to experience some kind of impact point with that lover, because you're not investing in yourself and you're expecting that person to always fill your cup instead of working on a way to independently fill your own cup. So if that person ever leaves, you're not devastated and going in a downward spiral. Okay, so that's the point of the relationships. But let's look at promiscuity, because there is a identity where men and women will view their conquests as some kind of identity, and then they'll get so caught up in having as many conquests as possible, because it feels like it gives them some kind of title, or you know a ladies man, or a sugar mama, or it's when you actively believe or attach yourself to that identity, you allow yourself to be an open vessel for a lot of different uh, a lot of different attachments that other people have to become your own. And because energy is non-physical and you can't see it, you can absorb other people's attachments or downfalls or pitfalls or hang-ups, and then not know that you can adopt them as your own without knowing that they're someone else's. Reciprocal relationships do exist. Absolutely, Steve. I am proof of that. And we talked about that in yesterday, how someone very special to me was exhibiting personality disorder, and they're actively in real time accepting that way of thinking was their downfall, and they're working on it actively and we're doing this together through my ability to keep it real, and there's too, to always say the truth to each other, to be even if it seems cruel sometimes, but to back it up with love. So that was a side note. But let me see. So I asked the question, are there any modern day true stories about sexual promiscuity that mirror ancient myth and folklore? Because we know that when you incarnate, if you choose a blueprint or an archetype of promiscuity, if that is or if you've even, maybe that wasn't the blueprint you chose, but that was just a path that unfolded for you, that you ended up choosing, that wasn't supposed to be your blueprint, you can always come back to the blueprint. But I asked this question: the intersection of modern hypersexual behavior and ancient mythology isn't found in literal magic, but in the psychological archetypes that drive certain real-world figures. When promiscuity, obsession, and sexual chaos collide today, they frequently trace the exact narrative contours laid out thousands of years ago. Several prominent real-world examples mirror specific mythological framework. The fall of the cult leader. So we know doing the readings, there's lots of cults that base their whole belief system upon sexual rituals, okay? And they may not even realize the implications of the sexual freedom that they're exhibiting, but it does have dire consequences when you live a life of sexual promiscuity, even if it's in the guise of sexual freedom, okay? In Greek, Dionysus was the god of wine, ritual madness, religious ecstasy, and unbridled sexuality. His followers, the Maenads, engaged in frenzied, intoxicated orgies that completely broke down societal taboos, eventually leading to chaos, violence, and destruction, which really resonates with a lot of today's cult-like behaviors that are being exhibited through the entertainment industry and through other cults that have taken form. Okay, it's always the same MO, which could be the archon that also could have come up as Dionysus. We know that archons present themselves in specific types of energy depending on who attaches themselves to them and what their desires are. And so Dionysus is a archetype or an archon that has this energy and that gets absorbed by a lot of people who don't see sexuality as a problem, okay? And it's not a problem, but if it's used in the wrong way, it can be, okay? So the modern parallel, the rise and fall of Bhagwan Sri Rajneesh Osho and the Rajneeshpuram commune in the late 1970s and 80s. The mythic mirror is that Rajneesh preached a philosophy that integrated spiritual enlightenment with sexual liberation, attracting thousands of Westerners who engaged in dynamic, emotionally raw, and hypersexual group therapies and activities. What began as a pursuit of divine ecstasy and free love gradually devolved into a paranoid, insular ecosystem marked by power struggles, mass poisonings, and wiretapping, a literal recreation of a Dionysian cult collapsing under its own transgressive weight. Okay? The modern Don Juan, the curse of Eros. The Don Juan is an archetype. The Don Juan is a figure of folklore rather than ancient polytheism, but it's another archetype. It might not be ancient, it's newer, but like I said, every era has an archetype that matches up to ancient mythology, okay? While Don Juan is a figure of folklore rather than ancient polytheism, the archetype stems from Eros, Cupid, and Aphrodite. So Eros is Cupid. The embodiment of desire as a destabilizing force. In folklore, the promiscuous figure is cursed, never to find true satisfaction, doomed to chase the thrill of the conquest endlessly. The modern parallel, the documented life of Italian playboy Giacomo Casanova, whose real memoirs read like folklore, or in the modern era, high-profile figures like John F. Kennedy, or legendary actor Warren Beatty, who was famously rumored to have slept with nearly 13,000 women. Do you think that that's a healthy identity? To identify as somebody who can get anything they want, anyone they want, anytime, as many times as they want. No, it creates an insatiable desire to endlessly chase conquests, okay? Because like we said, it's about, like Aristotle said, to live a divine life. It's about the golden mean, the ratio. It's not about the excess or the in excess. It's about living in the middle. So it's not that you can't do it. It's not that you can't have sex or enjoy physical pleasure. It's about that question, how, let me reread it. It's about that question. And the question is, I'm sorry, I just want to be accurate for you guys. Being virtuous means knowing how to feel or act at the right time, toward the right people, for the right motive, and in the right way. Okay? So, in the mythic mirror, in these lives, promiscuity behaves exactly like a curse from Aphrodite. The modern hyper seducer often operates and we have to remember that all of the gods and goddesses are extreme versions of human behavior. That's what they are, and those are that's what it looks like in the astral realm. So it's not that we should be like the gods and goddesses. They're just representations of human behavior at an extreme level or on the astral realm. Okay. And so when it comes down into physicality, it looks like Casanova, it looks like Warren Beatty, okay? In these lives, promiscuity behaves exactly like a curse from Aphrodite. So Aphrodite is the extreme. The modern hyper-seducer often operates not out of simple pleasure, but out of the compulsive, almost tragic psychological necessity. Okay, the mythic lesson of Eros is that unbridled desire becomes an insatiable hunger. In modern therapy, this is understood as sex addiction, where the individual uses intimacy as a drug to avoid confronting a deep-seated void, which is the lack of happiness. And we spoke of this in the first part of this episode, and that ultimately what we're looking for as a human when we want success, or when we want to get that job, or we want to get that person, it's happiness. But we have this distortion that I want to make a lot of money, and so I want to do this job because I'll make a lot of money, and then by having all this money I will be able to pay my bills on time and do this on time. But what if that job that makes you that money isn't the thing that brings you happiness? And so ultimately what that sentence is saying is that I'm equating money to happiness, but really what I'm looking for is happiness, and and a way to that is a comfortable life where I don't have to worry about my bills or things that create stress. But ultimately my goal is to be happy. Okay? And so the same with promiscuity. If you, at first it starts as a conquest, and it's exciting to have that, because it's hard to sleep with somebody. It takes effort, it takes time, it takes getting to know each other. Should we be just randomly, opening our legs or sticking it in a hole that just for the conquest, just because I can? I don't know if that's a healthy way of going about it, because eventually, if that's the way it starts, then the way it ends is not going to be good. Okay? And so, the deep-seated void, and so really what it's saying is that promiscuity isn't any different than using a drug. It's a coping mechanism. You, at first, you thought it was fun, but now, because you did it so often, now it's a source of validation. And if you don't get it, then you must not be wanted, and so therefore you're not validated. And so you continually chase tail in order to feel full, or you sleep with a lot of people because you think that the act of sex is attention or validation, when truly it's the opposite. And if you really want to find someone to give yourself to, you should be finding people that fit your values and your morals, and it should be a discussion where you're mutual about where you're at. I want to sleep with you, but I don't want to have a relationship with you. I just want to enjoy you in this way, and then I want to respect you at the same time. You can have sexual experiences, but you have to make sure that you're responsible. Go get your STDs checked. Make sure you're an outstanding citizen of human health before you go into someone else's bed. Make sure they're not married. Make sure you're not married. Make sure you're both on a common understanding of what this is, and what you want from it. There's things we don't do in society that lead to promiscuity being an identity, and it's not. It shouldn't be. It shouldn't be your identity. The digital siren, the lore of the succubus. In medieval folklore and ancient Mesopotamian myth, the succubus is a highly seductive entity that drains the life force, sanity, or wealth of men through sexual entrapment. And so we know on our channel we identify succubus and incubus as archons that show up in a specific way for specific people who exhibit promiscuity. Okay? The modern parallel, the phenomenon of high-stakes honey traps and digital adult content creators who leverage extreme sexual allure to systematically drain the fortunes of obsessed followers. A specific example includes the various modern cases of financial domination, findom, or high-profile instances where men ruin their careers, marriages, and life savings for an idealized, sexually explicit online relationship. And that reminds me of the strip club. I've been to strip clubs, and I've laughed about it, but it's really not funny because I've been to strip clubs where I've observed men, and it's always the same. They're showing off, they're spending all their money. And I had someone who had a family pizzeria, and we went to the strip club, and right after he closed the pizzeria, and he took all the money from that whole day of income from the pizza, and he spent it at the strip club. So like, do you want that? Do you really want to go to a strip club and look cool at the strip club when they're really just working? They're working you. You're not cool to them. You're actually a fool to them because you're giving them all your money. And you see really sad, depressed men who don't get any validation or attention because they're empty go to the strip club for validation because that stripper is going to treat you like you're the best man in the world. So um, it all comes down basically to, you need to make sure you're identifying first as a soul. If you want to nourish your soul, you want to attract happiness, you want to feel validated, you want to be full, you need to identify as a soul first, and then that's the source of happiness. The further you get away from what feeds the soul and from nourishing the soul and what matches your soul's energy, which is pure positive energy, the further you get away from that by your actions, the more unhappy you become through your thoughts, through your actions, and you start to become a very pliable, moldable person that can be molded by anyone who gives them validation, essentially. Okay? The mythic mirror, the ancient cautionary tale, was actually about a demon with wings. It was a psychological metaphor for how intense sexual fixation can cause a person to willingly participate in their own financial and social ruin. The modern OnlyFans whale, who bankrupts himself for a digital parasocial connection, is living the exact reality of the ancient sailor lured into the rocks by the sirens. Mm-hmm. Yeah. In Greek lore, the hubris of the satire, the Me Too reckoning. In Greek lore, satyrs were half men, half goat creatures, defined by inappropriate, relentless sexual pursuit. They answered to no moral code, driven entirely by appetite. However, when mortal men attempted to act like gods or satyrs, taking whatever they wanted without consequence, they committed hubris and were systematically destroyed by Nemesis, the goddess of retribution. The modern parallel is the downfall of Hollywood mogul Harvey Weinstein and financier Jeffrey Epstein. I'm telling you, every life lived, now, past, present, or future, incarnates with a blueprint or an archetype or a program for you to overcome and identify. The mythic mirror. For decades, these men operated under modern equivalent of divine immunity, treating human beings as a personal harem. The sudden and explosive collapse of their empires mirrors the exact mechanics of a Greek tragedy. A powerful figure believes they are above the rules of mortals, their sexual excess accumulate a debt of cosmic imbalance, and Nemesis arrives to strip them of everything, casting them into the modern equivalent of Tartarus, a prison. So, ancient myths were never just campfire stories about monsters and gods. They were cross-cultural psychological maps. When we look at modern headlines detailing extreme promiscuity, addiction, and downfall, we are simply watching the gods of old operate under new names. I can't make it up, okay? And so what Spirit is telling us is that when your mind chooses to identify as these very specific things we're going over, you separate yourself from your true identity, which is a divine spark of pure positive energy, okay? But Aristotle argues that you're never not that. And so just by accepting that you are that, you open the door to releasing or letting go of the old identity that you thought you were in the past that got you to where you are now. and in the problems that are the consequences of your old identity. And so the questions is, can we change? Can mental illness change? Can we become fixed and then unfixed? And the answer is yes. And the reason why it's yes, empirically, implicitly, is because energy is constantly moving. And so the very act of fixing yourself on an identity goes against the way that energy and your spirit moves. Your spirit is in a constant state of toroidal movement, where it's going in and out of itself. It's perpetuating itself through magnetism, through magnetic energy. You have a positive pole and a negative pole, and they pull each other in and out of each other. And so when I see, as a psychic, when I see spirit in the astral realm, they're constantly moving and morphing in and out of all these different shapes and forms and versions, and it's never not moving. And so that's why Spirit says the minute you become fixed, or the minute your belief system becomes concrete about something, is the minute you separate yourself from divinity, because divinity is a constant creator. It's constantly recreating itself over and over again in many different ways. And so Spirit has alluded to us that you're never fixed and you can always change. You're not going to be the same person you were in high school and have the same beliefs as the person you are with kids, in your 40s. And so when you don't want to look at the things that you've chosen to attach yourself to, or the belief systems that you identify as, when you don't want to look at how it could be wrong or it could be different for someone else, and you believe that the way you think has to be the way everyone else thinks, you go into separation from self, and you start to become angry and unhappy. You start to exhibit low emotion, and it's not because you are those things. That's your body's way of telling you that you're separated from your blueprint, from what you actually are. And the 1331 in the chat, and this is just, and we are not our emotions at any given time, because we know that we might be feeling anger right now in this second, but 10 minutes from now I'm not going to be angry anymore, and I'm going to be in a different emotion. And so, identifying yourself as your job, or your anger, or your betrayal, or your promiscuity, or your sexual orientation, which we'll get into now and we'll end on, is very dangerous, because it could change at any minute. You could change your mind. Okay, which comes to, I wanted to end it on this, which comes to sexual orientation and gender identity. Because we seem to have this misconception that, identifying as whatever we want to identify as is it's a problem, and it's really not. God says every experience is valuable. And so what God wants is to experience different ways of existing in physicality, and we come here for the variety. And so what we can bet on is that one person can feel one way and another person can feel a different way, and they can both exist at the same time and not even come in contact with each other. So then that brings up the question, why the hell do we care? What does it matter? If it's not affecting us directly, then what do we care? And so why do we make such a big stink about it? And I don't know. We're going to find out. This is one that I really wanted to do live in real time with Spirit. So I do have ancient myths of gender and sexuality, which I want to bring up. And I just want to say, first and foremost, God doesn't care if you're gay. God doesn't care if you're transgender. But the thing that we have to remember is that we incarnate with archetypical blueprints. And so if you have an archetype where your life is to question what your sexuality is, and you refuse to look at that, the longer you refuse to look at your sexual orientation or or the way your soul is choosing to express itself, because it's different from what society wants or whatever, it can separate you from your soul, and it can cause consequence. It can cause dire consequence. When you live your whole life lying to yourself about being gay, you essentially become a pathological liar, because you've trained yourself to become a liar because you don't want to reveal the truth about your sexual orientation because you're afraid of persecution. Or you were touched as a child and it made you very confused about your sexual orientation and you really don't know. And you're confused because society says you have to be either this or that. But really, energy is fluid. And so, in the past episodes, like the way Spirit views men and women and the way they fall in love is, in the future, the way it would look is love does not have a face. It's energetic. And so, and we have a lot of soul ties with a lot of different energies that you may encounter. So you may have been touched as a child, you're confused about your sexuality, you think you're gay, you think you're not gay, but you're not giving yourself a label, and so you're identifying as confused. And so instead of just accepting that you like both, or it depends on the person, there's lots of many layers to this, and I don't know if I'll be able to touch on all of them, but what I'm saying is God doesn't care about sex. Okay, sex is just it's a physical manifestation of a way to bring a soul into human incarnation. So it's very what's the word, sacred. Okay, and so the main goal of sex is to do that. If we didn't have the mechanism that perpetuated that in physical form, it would be really hard to desire to, procreate. And so, on a physical, evolutionary level, God has provided it to be pleasurable, so that way when we do it, it's twofold. It's fun, and it's sacred, and it's a portal, and um, it can be a very connective type of experience if you're doing it the way Aristotle says that you should do anything, and to do it with the right intention and think about doing it the right way. Okay, but if you are so conflicted about who you are and your sexual orientation and your identification, it can cause a disruption in the natural way you unfold your identity. Okay, so that's why Spirit says just identify as a soul, and that way when you are faced with these intersections of fluidity, you're not resisting, you're not in resistance. Okay, so in those past episodes, what Spirit revealed to us is God doesn't identify as a man, as a human, and so we can't place human emotions and desires on God because God is omnipotent. And so, Patty, that's so funny. I've never been called Patty before. Gender confusion is understandable as life is androgynous. Absolutely. I think that's the word, is connecting sacredly before you randomly throw yourself into confusion because of their DNA in your body. Absolutely. So I think what often gets translated is guilt and shame about not being societal's views on, it's this or that. And what Spirit is saying is that it's really fluid. In the future, the person that you're with is actually going to be frequential. It's not going to be, man or woman. It's literally based off of the matching energy you have, and that every relationship you have isn't necessarily meant to be one that's forever. You could meet, you could be a woman that didn't even know that you were attracted to women until you met a specific person that matches where you're at in the specific place and time in your energy, and you're attracted to them because there's a resonance in the matching of the frequency where there may be a lesson that needs to be learned. And then if that relationship isn't meant to be forever and the lesson is learned, you're meant to break away from that person and release each other since the lesson is learned. And then your next relationship could be a man because of the energy of the frequential matching energy of whatever needs to be learned from that person. You see what I'm saying? So instead of choosing a person because of their status or their sexual orientation or man or woman or their money, you quite literally choose someone based off of their frequency and the matching of it to yours, instead of these very specific ways. Is caused from hate towards, I'm sorry, I didn't see what the message was. We all love you, Patty, thank you. Gender confusion is understandable as life is androgynous. And that's very true because God is both feminine and masculine energies. God is the mother and the father. And so our whole universe is a reflection of that. And, even the sun is father and the earth is mother and we're Holy Spirit. And that's where we've kind of like veered off the path where it was kind of, veered off for us, where they made the Holy Trinity, the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit. But cosmologically, that just doesn't make any sense because you can't create life with a father and a son. You have to have the mother. And so that's where we veered off of our path of our intuitively knowing, where we're disconnected from intuitively knowing that it's the mother and the father that bridge the gap to make a portal to open for the Holy Spirit to come in and have a human experience. Okay, so then that leads us to, God doesn't care if you're gay. You can adopt children and have the same experience. You can be gay and be a good person. You can be gay and be a bad person. It's literally what Aristotle says is it's all about your intention. Okay, because God can see everything. It goes to the effect of someone watching you. God knows your heart at any time. God is omnipotent, and so God is the source, prime creator. We all come from prime source creator of pure positive energy. You identify as that first, and then you can start to navigate where you're at. And also another thing with sexual orientation and gender identity is that it can change at any minute. You could be a man that was sexually touched as a child by your mother, and you grow up wanting to dress like your mother or wanting to dress like a transsexual, because truly what that is you needing a mother figure in your life that didn't touch you. You're trying to figure out a way to incorporate a mother energy that nurtures you and supports you, but your mind is trying to compensate for that, and it turns into the darkness of allowing yourself to dress like a woman to feel a mother's love. So you can see how the distortion of trauma and not addressing it and being fixated on it can turn into hyper transgender ideation or transsexualism, or these are out. It's layered. It's not, you can be born and grow up and feel, since the day you were born, that you're in the wrong body, and that's just a blueprint that your soul wanted to experience. You can be someone who's born as a woman, and then because of your parents' pitfalls and distortions of their own, they teach you that it's okay to be a cat. You identify as a cat, and so you're 7 years old and you say your parents want to be a cat, and your parents are disconnected, so they're like, oh, he wants to be a cat. sure, let's treat them like a cat. And that child will literally grow up thinking they're a cat, but they could change their mind at any time. So it's like this, it's fluidity, it's energy. Energy is fluid. You're not going to feel the same way that you felt when you were 12, when you're 19. And so I think there needs to be like a flexibility and an understanding that you have a lot of outside factors, you have a lot of thoughts about and insecurities and confusion. But if you just anchor yourself in the knowing that you're first and foremost a divine spark of energy, and that you're never alone, and that you're always loved, and that you have guidance anytime, it can help ground you so you can understand where you're at in the moment. Why do I feel like I want to dress in women's clothes? Why do I feel like I'm a boy but I'm a girl? What, should I act on this? There's Spirit always says never be impulsive, take time, have patience. Ask yourself the question and then wait for your spiritual guidance to come, and then you'll know if you're identifying as this because it's making you feel validated, or if you're identifying this as this because it's how you truly feel. So there's the two differences, and we need to be able to identify the difference, because you don't want to be you don't want to be an 8-year-old who feels like they should be an 8-year-old boy who feels like they should be a girl, and you go and you take all the meds and all the things that transition you, and then you become 21 years old and you realize, oh shit, I really just want to be a man. Well, now it's too late, and you made that decision when you were 8 years old, or even as a grown-up. I watched a documentary about transgenderism, trying to understand it, and one of the people regretted their transition because it's permanent. You can't go back. But they were going through a hard time at the time of that they decided to transition. We are so amazing, as I notice Robin fly up and look at me from my balcony. Oh, Robin, that's amazing. Exactly, that's why we can't transition kids. You can feel however you want to feel, it doesn't make it true. Dress however you want, cut your dingling off, do whatever you want to do, but you'll always still be the gender you were born as. The father is the sun, moon. The father is the sun, the mother, earth, their child. That's fine, but that doesn't make you a woman. Well, I think we need to stop getting hung up on... I think it's right and wrong. I think it's right and wrong. I think the misconception is that it's tough because, like, let's say transgenders in sports, it's like, in a fair world, when it comes to sports, you get put up against a person that matches you, your weight and your size and your level of competition, right? But nowadays we're seeing men who want to transgender into women are being put into women's sports, and the women are feeling like that's wrong, because technically the woman that's transgender is bigger and stronger, because essentially biologically they're still a man, but mentally and in their mind they're identifying as a woman. So what are the dangers of that? I think in the future what we're going to see is there isn't just man and woman, there's going to be man, woman, and transgender. And so transgenders will be able to be in their own category of themselves, because we need to accept that this is a part of God's will. This is a part of accepting this new way of being. Now, is every transgender person truly feeling like they're in the wrong body? No. And that's part of this episode that we want to talk about, because this isn't something that's new, that just happened, that busted on the scene. This is ancient. This is ancient times. It's been recorded, and we'll get into it. But it just goes to show that, divine energy is not male or female physically. It's the energy, it's the balanced energy of both, because we live in a dualistic universe of electromagnetism. So you have to have the two to exist. You have to have both of them. Just like in our in our brains is the right and left hemisphere, the masculine and the feminine. They both balance each other out, so that way you're not, you're not in a state of confusion all the time, in a heart space where you're not logical, or you're not just completely logical without any empathy. So you need both. Okay? So the problem is you do have people who are identifying as another gender because they feel like they lack validation. They feel like they don't belong. They feel like they're missing the part of the experience where they belong somewhere. And so I think that what I'm bringing up is, how can one identify, do I truly feel this way? Or am I just identifying as this because it's a way for me to be accepted and validated? And I think that there's that both of these exist. I think there are actual people who are born that actually feel like they're in the wrong body. Spirit, why does this happen when people are born into the wrong body? Can you bring any information up to us about that? The perfect alibi. The perfect alibi. What game show would you be best on? Yeah, I'm telling you, it all comes down to the blueprint and the archetypes. If a soul incarnates and they're born feeling like they're in a different body, there is a reason for that. Your soul chose that archetype, that blueprint, that program for a reason. And it's a variety of reasons. One of the ones that comes up the most is because every incarnation they choose to be a man over and over again. And now they've chosen to be a man so many times that it's become imbalanced in the universe, and they have to start having incarnations where they're a woman. And so in that incarnation, the imprint of all their past incarnations have been men, the imprint of that can be read in the energy from them, and they can feel that energy of a masculine presence of all their incarnations being imprinted on the woman incarnation that they chose. And so that's another reason why it's important to be in alignment with your spirit team, because you get the veil of forgetting, and so you forget that you chose to be a woman. If you chose to be a woman and you transition yourself back to a man, you're actually defaulting the path that was chosen for you, and you're deviating from the plan the blueprint that you chose, and that can have dire consequences as well. Okay, so it's very layered, it's very multidimensional. There isn't just one reason, and it is an experience that can be valid. And God wouldn't have created it if it wasn't a valid experience. And God says all experiences are valuable. Okay? So I said, are there any mythological ancient stories that are akin to today's modern topic of transgender being gay? Absolutely. While the specific modern terms transgender and gay didn't exist in antiquity, ancient mythologies across the globe are rich with stories of gender transformation, same-sex love, and deities who defy the strict gender binary. Far from being a modern invention, fluid identities have been woven into human storytelling for thousands of years. Hindu mythology, divine fluidity, and third genders. Hindu mythology features numerous instances of gender-fluid deities, physical transformations, and same-sex unions. I'm sorry if I say this wrong. Ardhana Rishara. This is a composite androgynous form of the deity Shiva and his consort Parvati. Split directly down the middle, one half is male and the other half is female, illustrating that the divine essence transcends single gender boundaries and integrates both. Shikhandi, the Mahabharata. Shikhandi is one of the closest ancient parallels to transgender man. Born female as Shikhindini, she intensely identified as male, raised as a son, and later transformed physically into a man through a deal with a forest spirit. As a male warrior, Shikhandi played a pivotal role in winning the massive Kurukshetra war. Mohini. The god Vishnu takes on a permanent female avatar named Mohini on multiple occasions. In one famous story, Mohini marries the warrior Aravan. Today, many members of India's transgender Hijra community, specifically the Aravanas, celebrate this narrative in an annual festival viewing Aravan as a patron figure. And here's a half male, half female deity, Ardhanurshara, a picture of the. And so in antiquity, this was not a big deal, okay? It wasn't a big deal. Greek and Roman mythology transcending the binary. The classical world used myth to explain everything from the origins of same-sex attraction to physical transitions. Apollo and Hyacinthus. Apollo, the god of music and poetry, fell deeply in love with a beautiful mortal prince named Hyacinthus. Their tragic romance, which ended when a jealous wind god caused a discus to strike Hyacinthus, is one of the most explicit same-sex love stories in Western myth. Out of grief, Apollo turned his lover's blood into a hyacinth flower. Iphis and Ianth. Chronicled in Ovid's Metamorphosis, Iphis was assigned female at birth, but raised as a boy by a mother protecting her child from an abusive father. As an adult, Iphis fell deeply in love with a woman named Length. Right before their wedding, praying for a way to be together, the goddess Isis answered their prayers and physically transformed Iphis into a man. Okay, so it's just, I'm just revealing to you, these are ancient mythological archetypes and blueprints that have already recorded this happening in the past. This isn't anything new. And so what that reveals to us is that these are valid experiences. But when you identify as something that is against what your blueprint was, or you're not learning the lesson, or you're overlooking the main goal of what you're identifying as, it can change at any moment, because gender identity and sexuality can be energetically fluid. And so when you fix yourself like, I only like men, I'm only attracted to men, well, when you put yourself in that position, you literally cut yourself off from experiencing love in a different way, because God's not limited by your human beliefs and expectations. You could be cutting yourself off from a truly loving experience because you're not willing to accept that you could be bisexual, or you could identify differently. Or the opposite, where you had a trauma and you didn't identify it for whatever reason, and you found belonging in a community, so you decided to become something, and then you go through with the procedure, and then you change your mind, and now it's too late. Well, now you're in a world of hurt. You have a lot of acceptance to overcome, when really you could have just waited to get through this emotional turmoil, point of your life, to see how you feel a little bit later. You give it time, because emotions come and go, energy and motion. Just because you had a heartbreak and you feel, it's so layered. There's so many ways this can come up, especially if you were abused as a child sexually and you're sexually confused. The guilt and shame of that can often, make people not see the downfall of committing to a specific gender identity, okay? Caeneus, originally a woman named Caeneus, she was granted a wish by the sea god Poseidon. Caeneus requested to be transformed into an invulnerable male warrior so that he would never be wronged again. Poseidon, so born a woman, Poseidon granted the wish, and Caeneus lived the rest of his life as a legendary hero among the Lapiths. And so that's just a story, that a blueprint or an archetype where, this can actually happen. And so we have to accept that, we need to create a way that people can identify very safely and explore that and in a safe place without an extreme reactive gamble or risk, and just explore it in a very safe way until they get to a place where they can accept that this is truth, or this is flexing all the time. And because humans who are going through a lot can be emotionally reactive, it's almost like a catch-22, because you're identifying this uncomfortable feeling, well, it must be because I'm not not who I truly want to be, so let me take the actions to be who I truly want to be. But then you find that you become that and you're still unhappy, and it goes back to, just because you change outwardly your gender doesn't mean that biologically you are that gender. And so we have to be able to identify within people, is this how I truly feel, like mentally, emotionally, spiritually? Is this the blueprint of my design? Or is this a mental obstruction that's showing me that I have no identity, and I'm grasping at straws trying to identify as something so I belong somewhere, so I'm validated, because I'm unable to validate myself, so there's two things going on here. The myth of the androgynes. In Plato's Symposium, the playwright Aristophanes shares a myth that humans were originally round creatures with 2 heads, 4 arms, and 4 legs. Some were male, some were female, and some were male, androgynous. When the gods split them in half out of fear of their power, humans were left to spend their lives searching for their missing half. Those split from the male or female entities sought same-sex love, offering an ancient explanation for homosexuality. And so what that says to me is a metaphor for when you fall as a soul. And what I mean by that is when you incarnate. Your soul always knows the androgyny of the universe, of Source Prime Creator, that there's no genders in divine energy. It's all one. It's a unity consciousness. And these are just physical manifestations of a dualistic magnetic universe of hot and dry, up and down, male and female. Okay? And so when you incarnate and you're attracted to women, is it because, or the same sex, it's not wrong. It's not wrong to feel that way. It's just an expression of your soul's blueprint or archetype. But you can also get pushed into same-sex attraction through trauma, which is okay too. That's okay as well. But it can also cause confusion. So you have to ask yourself, which one is it? Am I born this way, or was it through trauma? And you have to identify which one it is first, because if you don't, if you identify as something that confuses you, that will just lead to more confusion. Okay? That's the point of not blaming child, because the drive childs to love themselves instead of God. Basically, yes, but we usually achieve it living God, not ourselves. Okay, so Norse mythology, gender-bending deities. Norse myths frequently feature gods crossing gender boundaries, often to gain power, knowledge, or outsmart enemies. Okay, Loki the shapeshifter. Loki regularly shifted genders and sexes, and we know that Loki is the equivalent to Lucifer, just in Norse mythology. So again, these are all archetypes or energies or blueprints of what we are going to experience, of energies we're going to identify as, or and really what we recommend is that you don't identify them, but you accept them as an archetype or a blueprint for an experience you're meant to have and overcome. Okay? And so it says, in one famous tale, to prevent a giant from winning a bet, Loki transformed into a mare, became pregnant, and gave birth to Sleipnir, Odin's legendary eight-legged horse. Okay, and so this is Loki, the shapeshifter, not only shifts into genders and sexes, but also animals. And so it just speaks to energy fluidity, that you can feel, you can resonate with the energy of horses. It doesn't mean that you should be a horse. It just means, and you shouldn't take action to identify as a horse and now your whole life is about being a horse or a cat or whatever. But you should take that as a sign that your soul resonates with the energy of horses. And so it's not that you should become one, but the archetype of the horse is something that you may be able to use in order to understand yourself, because maybe you were one in a past, or maybe you have a spirit animal that's a horse, so it's our mind that automatically defaults to, oh well, I love horses, or I'm really attracted to the same sex, so I must be gay. But yet you live in a small bubble where you're not open to to spiritual energy, to the fact that your identity is a spiritual entity having a human experience. So your mind attaches itself to, oh, I love horses, I love them so much, it's all I think about, I must want to be one. Let me pretend to be a horse, because that's going to make me happy, because clearly there's some kind of connection with me and horses. And I'm just using this as an example. And so you start eating horse food, and you start, and so that's just an unhealthy attachment to what your soul is trying to tell you about horses, or what your soul is trying to tell you about your inability to accept yourself the way you are, or the way your soul is trying to help you identify why you're attracted to the same sex and your guilt about that. So it always comes back to the way your mind is processing your identification as these things. Okay, I hope I'm not word salading, but I'm just trying to make sense of it all. Odin and Sigir. Odin practiced thier, a form of magic that was culturally reserved strictly for women. His practice of this art led other gods, particularly Loki, to insult him for crossing traditional gender lines, yet Odin embraced it to gain ultimate wisdom. Thor's bridal disguise. When the giant Primir stole Thor's hammer, Thor dressed up in a bridal gown and veil, pretending to be the goddess Freya, to infiltrate the giant's hall and retrieve it. So going back to transsexuals, men who desire to dress like women. In this case, it was it was a means to an end to get something that belonged to him. Okay, so he disguised himself, but transsexuals will dress. A man who wants to dress like a woman doesn't mean they're transgender. It could potentially be identifying a mother wound where they didn't have a mother that nurtured them, and so their mind is trying to compensate for the lack of a mother figure by becoming one themselves, and then it becomes an unhealthy attachment to dressing up like a woman because they didn't have a proper mother figure that nurtured them, and that's what they're essentially searching for. But when you start identifying as that, yeah, I'm a transsexual, I like to dress as a woman, you're not actually figuring out the reason why you want to do that, because when it all comes down to it, God doesn't desire to dress like a woman, because God is not human, but you are a version of God having a human experience. And so the question is, why, if God wouldn't dress like a woman, then why do I feel the need to do it? And is it hurting anybody? Is it hurting myself? Does it make me feel guilty? So it goes back to what Aristotle said about, asking the right questions and the right energy. Okay? Um, okay. Um, where is it? Understanding sexual orientation. Identifying with your sexual orientation is a deeply personal, evolving, and layered experience. It is much more than just a label. It represents how you understand your desires, how you relate to others, and how you navigate the world. And so, identity versus attraction versus behavior. One of the most important distinctions is that that who you are attracted to, how you identify, and how you act do not always align perfectly, and that's completely normal. Attraction, the innate emotional, romantic, or sexual pull you feel towards certain people or no one in the case of asexuality, that just goes to say what we were saying about fluidity and flexibility. Just because you're attracted to a woman today because this person holds a specific energy that where you need to be in some kind of relationship in order to gain a higher understanding of something or to learn a lesson, you could feel an attraction or a resonance with someone, but does it mean that you should actually, have a full-blown sexual experience with them, or are you just interpreting your emotional attraction or resonation to this person as a sexual attraction? So again, understanding yourself so well that when you are attracted to someone or when you do resonate with someone, you aren't misidentifying the energy that is bringing you two together. Like for instance, for example, I had someone in my past who I had a past life with where I was married to them, and spirit showed me that we had unfinished business, and so they came into my life again in a very specific way, and I had to meditate on this relationship because it felt so weird and strangely familiar. So I have spirit burps at the same time. And so instead of taking that initial spark of attraction or what's the word I want to use? Like I forget the word to use. Interpretation of that energy, which is non-physical. I met them and I felt like I knew them. Instead of my mind creating this web of, interconnectedness where, oh, I must be attracted to them, I must want to have an affair with them, I must want to, no, you have to ask your spirit team, what is this resonation with this person, and how should I move forward? Okay, and so what they showed me was, in a past life, this specific person tried to own me. My family married us, or our families, it was like an arranged marriage. It was two farming families, but I was 14 and they were like 30, and they were very abusive, and I ended up, in the past life, I ended up, unaliving them with a iron because they were abusing me, and then I ended up, taking my own, and then, so in this life, there's unresolved conflict that needs to be resolved in a more healthy manner. And so so what happened was my soul recognized this unprocessed energetic bond that needed to be severed or needed to have some kind of conclusion and resolution energetically for me to move on into a different level of consciousness and awareness. It was quite literally like a boss, okay, but energetically. But if you're somebody who can't recognize that energetic exchange, your mind will automatically perceive that as some kind of romantic connection or some kind of reason to pursue a connection in a very physical way instead of an energetic way. So the way that I disconnected from that energy and closed it out was I decided that this person is still exhibiting those same traits as they did in that past life. By talking to them and by asking them specific questions, they may not have known my parameters of what I was trying to assess, but it doesn't matter. And so that's one way we can misidentify attraction to somebody. It might not be attraction, it might be something from the past that needs to have an energetic release. Okay? And so that person asked me for money, and in that moment I did give them money, because what it did was it showed that I don't harbor any ill will towards them from the past life, and I'm willing to help them and be of service, and then that's it, I let them go. So it was almost like I paid them to stay out of my life, because they don't want to pay the money back. But really, on an energetic level, that was me paying them to never come back. Does that make sense? So that cord's cut, boom, I went on to the next level and they're out of my life. Then they'll never come back. Okay, and then there's behavior. The actual romantic or sexual actions you engage in. A person might be attracted to multiple genders, but only choose to date one or remain celibate without changing their core orientation. So the behavior is, you don't have to engage with every person you have that gives you a little tickle in your nether regions, and the minute you act upon that behavior or that action because you feel, you impulsively act on that small moment of attraction, then that means that you could have that with multiple people. That means that you'll be acting on that every time you have that thing. But it doesn't mean that you should, identity, because you don't ever know where that person's at in their consciousness or what's attached to them, and so you're quite literally impulsively reacting to something that might even be their own promiscuity or their own feelings towards you. They might be having an instant attraction towards you, and you absorb that, you think that's yours, and you act on something that wasn't actually yours to begin with. Okay? And then identity, the label or lack thereof you choose to describe yourself. Identity is about finding community, self-understanding, and a sense of belonging. Absolutely. But if you identify, if you say, yeah, I am, my pronouns are he, I'm born a woman, but my pronouns are he. Okay, that's great. But now, every time you encounter a person who is confused about how you identify, you're blaming that person for not properly identifying you, because you never taught them how to love you, and so you're getting mad every person you encounter, and that's building up. You're actually creating an egregore, an attachment that's extremely unhealthy, that expects every person you encounter to know that how you identify. When really, if you choose to identify different than the gender you were born, you should be taking the responsibility every person you meet to say, hey, I know it's really different, and you're probably not used to it, but I was born a woman, but I'm identifying as a man. So in the future, I'd love to be your friend. You just call me he. I'm just a he. I'm Brendan. And then okay, you got it, no problem. But instead, what happens is, the expectation to just know by the way I look that how I want to be identified, by the way I've presented myself to you, you should automatically know, and if you don't, then I'm going to get really mad at you, and then I'm going to have a bad day because of that. And then that's a perpetual cycle, and then they wonder why they're unhappy. You have to set the bar for how you want to be treated. You're not in a relationship with your lover and expect them to read your mind, or that you have a bad dream that they cheated, and now you're mad at them because they cheated on you in the dream, but you never tell them that, so now you're mad at them all day, and then they wonder why you're mad at them, and you just continue to do that over and over again. No, you say, I had a bad dream that you cheated on me, and I'm mad at you now, and then you can laugh about it, and boom, it's done. It's transmuted. You see what I'm saying? So it's that's like a very crude way of, you know, explaining it, but it's kind of like the same thing, okay? Okay? Fluidity in the Kinsey scale. Sexual orientation is rarely a rigid black and white binary. For many people, attraction exists on a spectrum and can shift over time. Experiencing changes in the intensity or direction of your attractions throughout your life, realizing your orientation has shifted, doesn't mean your past identity was a lie or a phase. It simply means humans' sexuality can evolve as we grow. The Kinsey scale, an early tool that conceptualized sexuality as a scale, 0 exclusively heterosexual to sex exclusively homosexual, demonstrating that most people fall somewhere in the nuanced middle, and it's not fixed. It can change at any time. So I think that's something that, going into the future, we're going to be able to create new, safe places where it is going to be, it's not just male and female. It is people who do identify differently, and that are going to have their whole subculture, and it's going to be a whole thing where it'll be 3 genders, and that way we don't have to, force, transgenders to be in places where, it's not fair for others. In the end, we want it to be fair for everyone. We want everyone to be able to be who they are and express themselves the way they are and where they're at, and to safely and, without hurting people, without, you know, projecting our beliefs onto people and forcing them to be something they're not. We want to have a safe space for everyone. So what we'll end with is that, don't identify as any earthly endeavor. Isn't God all things to all people, though? Yes. What Aristotle says is identify as a soul. If you identify as a soul, what it does is it allows you to be flexible for whatever you encounter. Because if you become fixed on a specific identity, whether you're gay, transgender, a military man, your job, your occupation, your sexual conquest, these are all earthly things that don't exist outside of Earth. Okay? And so if you identify yourself first and foremost as a soul, what it does is it helps you to not be so fixated on a specific identity. So when something happens that pushes you out of that identity, you don't go into psychosis and you don't remain stuck. You allow yourself to be flexible and able to change with the wind. Okay? Otherwise, if you get stuck in an old mind state and your belief systems are so rigid that you're unable to be open-minded or flexible, you create a prison for yourself that never gets to grow or change or experience something else. And that's where our identity crisis comes in, and it becomes something that makes you feel empty. It does. It makes you feel separated. It makes you searching for validation in places that will never fill you up. So the main thing we want to end with is that, you're, oh yeah, we did want to touch on witches, but maybe that'll have to be a whole other episode that's by itself, the archetype of being a witch, but that's definitely something that's ancient as well. But in the end, what we're saying is, you are not your pain, you are not your suffering, you are not your trauma, you are not your sexual orientation, you are not your gender, you are not your occupation, you are not your anger, you are not your relationship, you are not an animal, you are a non-physical being having a human experience. And if you want to come back to unity consciousness and you want to stop being in a fixed place where there's no growth and you're experiencing low emotion and you want to get out of that, I'll tell you what Aristotle recommended that you should do, and we'll end it on that. Aristotle's Nicomachean Ethics is a foundational philosophical text written by the ancient Greek philosopher Aristotle in 340 BC. Instead of focusing on a strict list of rules, Aristotle, like do not lie, Aristotle focused on a deeper question: what does it mean to live a good life? And it comes back to electromagnetism. Okay, it comes back to duality. If you want to flourish and you want to grow and you want to feel full and you want to have a life that attracts people, places, and things that match happiness and joy, then you have to understand that you're electromagnetic and you have to choose that daily in order to attract it. Okay? And so, virtue as the golden mean. To Aristotle, a virtue, meaning excellence, is a habit of character that enables you to make the right choices. He famously stated that virtue is always a balance, the golden mean between two extremes, deficiency and excess. So if you're in deficiency of virtue, you'll run away from everything. You'll be a coward. If you are in excess of virtue, you'll be foolhardy. You'll be reckless and put your life in danger and other people's lives in danger. But if you're in the golden mean, you will have courage to do what's right, even in the face of adversity, when people say, you shouldn't do that. Okay? Or if you're courage to do the right thing, even if it gets somebody in trouble, because it's the right thing to do. Okay? Being virtuous means knowing how to feel or act at the right time, toward the right people, for the right motive, and in the right way. So, a habituation of good. You don't become good at playing the piano just by reading a book about music theory. You have to practice. Aristotle argued that moral virtue works the same exact way. Or electromagnetism. If you want to attract or manifest good things, then you have to continuously choose to think good thoughts, do good deeds, treat people right, and ultimately the underlying mechanism of walking in virtue is treat others how you want to be treated. If you wouldn't want it done to your child, then don't do it to others and don't do it to yourself. Literally treat yourself as if you are your own best friend. How would you want your own best friend to show up for you? What would you say to your best friend? What are the things you would do for your best friend? How would you view your best friend? How would you talk about them? How would you engage with them? What activities would you do together? And so when you do that, when you treat yourself that way, when you choose to lift yourself up, lift others up, when you choose to think positive thoughts, when you choose to not self-deprecate yourself, when you choose to not boast, exaggerating, when you choose to not always care about being right, when you choose to accept that you're wrong sometimes, these are all things that build up by you choosing to do them every day on a daily basis, that clears your field and brings you closer to the positive electromagnetic field of positivity. And then electromagnetically you'll start attracting it, because you are habituating a pull towards the positive. But in the opposite, if you choose to keep identifying as things that have no growth, that lack ingenuity, that lack flexibility, then you will start to gravitate towards the negative pole, where all your thoughts are self-deprecating, and you judge people, and you judge yourself, and you're not being a good best friend to you. You attract people, places, and things that continue that cycle until you understand the archetype or the program that you're living, and you choose to change the program. You choose to change it. Okay? Ugh! So, let's end it on Spirit's Note. Spirit, what are the last things you'd like to say about this? Vitality. I am a being of light. I accept the divine energy in my body, and every one of my cells regenerates. Absolutely. Identify as a soul first, and you will see that anything you come into contact with, good or bad, can be transmuted through the lens that you are not the experiences you have, but you are more than that, and you're never alone, and you're always loved, and you never stop being that. And that is something that can anchor you and ground you into understanding and letting go of old identities that you clung to create new pathways for you to grow into. Okay? Ugh. Thank you so much. I love you. Thank you so much for being here. I feel good now. I feel like I got all of the things, and I think you understand what we're trying to say, and the observations we've brought up. Okay, so I'm so grateful that you guys even showed up. I am so grateful to attract my soul tribe, the people who understand. We're here for you. You are not crazy. You're going through a spiritual awakening. We're going into a golden age, and we're so happy to be here. Now to have a discussion on the witchcraft. Well, that'll have to be a whole Spirit News episode in itself, because it's definitely like a big archetype. It's a big, especially for star seeds or for healers, it seems to be the main archetype that healers choose in every incarnation to get to a certain level of healing or messenger or psychic person. So I'll definitely love to dive into that deeper. Maybe, oh, Robin, maybe we could have an interview about it once the episode is done. That would be really cool to have an interview with you and your experiences with it. But I love you guys so much. Thank you so much for being here. And thank you for all the gifts. Thank you for the likes. If you want to follow any of our socials, if you like what we're doing here and you want to follow all the progress and the work we bring forward, you can follow any of our socials through the link tree in the description bar. And thank Lady to babysit men. Be careful how you identify. I love you so much. I'll see you on the next one. Bye, Robin. Bye, everyone.